what makes one a great candidate for converting from a motel to a multifamily apartment?
From the outside, we're looking for suitability of where are these? Are they in neighborhoods? Are they next to neighborhoods? Are they in convenient areas along the highways? The other thing that we currently look at is, do they have exterior access? How easy or how accessible is it to run the things to run? Again, that's the sprinkler systems, maybe the monitoring systems, the electrical systems.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Real Estate Roundtable with MRTG Capital. My name is Tom Goodge, and as always, I'm here with my friend and business partner, Mr. Mike Rohm. How's it going, brother?
Hey, doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good, man. Another week, another fun topic for us to cover today.
Yeah, this is one that obviously is one of our passions. This is what we were set out to do, have done it, and continuing.
That's right. And what he is talking about are converting motels to multifamily apartment buildings. Now, this is one, today we wanted to just talk about, everything that we learned, what, you as investors, just kind of get a sneak peek on the back end, like what we go through to, consider a motel, all the different facets of it. And this is one that, it was during COVID, actually, right? Like where, we're reviewing a lot of typical deals and you kept circling back and you're like, listen, we need to really consider motel conversions, right? You're like, there's a lot of those that don't work for hospitality at this point in time when everyone's not allowed to travel. Right. But, affordable housing is still a crazy need.
Yeah, there were people all over the place. They were trying to get them into housing. The pandemic did other things, but it brought out the need for housing. I don't know, I guess the full reason behind that, but it was just like people were moving all over the place or just, again, homeless or in shelters, and the shelters were just, spending extra money to place them. The shelters were full. They were putting them in motels, wherever it may be. The pandemic really brought out the need for more affordable housing.
And I think that's probably just even when we talk about converting motels to multifamily apartment buildings, that's probably the first thing, the why, right? You're not going to do something, and you were just saying this, earlier today when we were talking, but, if there's a need, right? I mean, that's the whole reason why we do anything, right? From an investor perspective,
right.
Are we solving for a need? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. If there's not a need for something, then obviously there's not going to be a great demand. There's not going to be money to be made,
right?
Both for the company, both for the investors, and for this affordable housing, there is a crazy need,
right? And there was people from my work. We had people who they traveled. They come from Mississippi, Florida, actually wherever they were, and they would come and live in hotels, and that was completely acceptable for them, how they wanted to live. They didn't want to go home after work. Their family's away, come home, do their 12 hours of work, cut grass, do all the maintenance and everything else. So, I started looking at it from that aspect that these guys have been doing it for 20 or 30 years, traveling and living in this without the kitchenettes or whatever it may be. They just had the room with the microwave. I knew that, most of the time they'd tell me they would go get a loaf of bread for the week, pound of lunch meat or whatever. And that's how they did it without, they had the private bathroom, the bed, and sometimes a little living room type, but they didn't have a full kitchen. They improvised on things like that, or they did go out to dinner. That was just their lifestyle because they had per diems or however it was. And, it just makes you start looking at these different assets differently.
That's right. And you have traveling workers that you just talked about, but then also too, we've had former business owners even, right? That, they're very well off. They sold their businesses, and at the end of the day, they're like, listen, I don't want a house to have to maintain.
Right.
I don't want to have to worry about any of those things. I like to go to my camp every now and then, right? I have a camp. Yep. That's my home away from home. Yep. But I want to just sit in my room and play online poker.
Larry,
right? Like
Larry number 4.
Probably have pseudo millionaires staying in just little affordable houses. But I mean, across the board, there's so many different, and not just, once again, the need for it to be affordable, but then also to the other facets of it, right?
Mhm.
The fact that it's not a 2 bedroom, one bath or whatever, right? Like,
Right.
hey, I don't need all the extra rooms. I just want to play poker, or
That was Larry. The other people, they had a motel. Dave and Carolyn, they had one. They had all the headaches that came with it that they were dealing with, and they were just they wanted to downsize. They wanted to travel more. They're like,
Mm.
I can come here. I don't have to worry about the utilities. That's all part of what's included from our standpoint.
That's right.
But they had everything there. They just went, lived their life, and they're like, yeah, we want to go to Florida for a while, or they wanted to travel around with different festivals or whatever they did. They just did not want that burden of going home to deal with tenants on their side. Again, the maintenance, the upkeep, everything that they had to do. And they're just like, this
That's
is
right.
perfect. Again, they have their room, they have their private bathroom, little kitchen pseudo area, wasn't a full setup. And that's all they wanted. They wanted to be simple, just like Larry mentioned. He had the bar. He owned a bar and restaurant for, was it 20, 30 years or so is
Yeah.
what he had. And he was just like, I want to be closer to my cabin. And that's where he spent time with his, I think it was his daughters and son-in-law and his grandkids.
That's right.
So that's what he wanted. He wanted out of the hustle and bustle, and he wanted to just play poker. So he didn't want everything that comes with a 2 and 3 bedroom house to pay for it, to pay to heat it that he didn't need. Love that little space. That's all that was needed for his needs.
So, from an investor side of the house, when they're like, okay, we know these guys look through a ton of deals,
Mm-hmm.
day in and day out. What's something that we want to look for in a motel, right? Like, so obviously there are so many that are available all across the United States,
Right.
but what makes one a great candidate for converting from a motel to multifamily apartment?
So it kind of starts on the outside. So a lot of them, we're not looking at motels that are in a hotel district. Like if there's 5 hotels and there's this little motel in the middle of it, that's not a great residential area for these people, because you got to realize we're turning this into their home. It's
Mhm.
not just a hotel or motel they're staying in for the next month or 2 months. This is going to be their home. So from the outside, we're looking for suitability of where are these? Are they in neighborhoods? Are they next to neighborhoods? Are they in convenient areas along the highways? So that's one aspect of it, of the physical location of where they're at and what's right around it. The other thing that we currently look at is, do they have exterior access? Are you, entering your unit from the outside by itself, or are you going into the main lobby and then different corridors? I know we've had a lot of discussion about this. We like the ones that you're entering straight from the outside into your unit.
That's right.
There's, I don't want to say no loitering, but there's no hallway of where people can put stuff. That's your unit. It's your home. You walk in from where you park straight into your unit. So that's another aspect. Another big thing that we looked is the convertibility, I guess you could say. Can we get to the plumbing easy to put the kitchenettes in? We know we need to do sprinkler systems, and I know we'll circle back to the
Mhm.
what's required, but it really comes down to, are we going to be able to run pipe through here, make it look, the aesthetics of it, make it look nice, or are we running this just along block walls and ceilings and everything, and it's just going to look weird? So, how easy or how accessible is it to run the things that we need to run? Again, that's the sprinkler systems, maybe the monitoring systems, the electrical systems, on top of those kitchenettes and everything. So, just a little bit.
So, yeah, and I just want to circle back to something you said there too. When we talk about looking at in a building for, hey, does it have exterior corridor access,
Mhm.
right? The big thing that we always talk about is the safety of our tenants, right?
Mhm.
That safety is paramount. I
Right.
mean, and the one thing when you're looking at whether it be a multifamily apartment building, whether it be a motel conversion, it needs to be well lit, one, but then
Mhm.
also two, not having, not setting yourself up for failure.
Right.
If everything is just an interior corridor and there are full-time residents there, everybody's vetted, but then people are still bringing their friends or insert what have you.
Mhm.
And, you know, peek down the hall, may have tons of people coming in and out all the time, meeting new friends at college or whatever it is. And Sarah, who's 2 units past him, may not want to have to always go and elbow around his buddies who are hanging out in the hallway, right? It's one, she doesn't feel safe, may not be safe, setting someone up for success to be able to just get into their unit, live their life. And yes,
Right.
obviously, when you're in a multifamily apartment building, whether it was a converted motel, whether it be a normal one, other people are part of life. But at the end of the day, we want to make it as comfortable as possible for everyone, and anyone who lives in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where it comes, a lot of the old motels and hotels, you go to the interior corridor, well, the windows are fixed. You can't open up the window to get fresh air or whatever. So, to climb out of those in case of an emergency, not likely. You would have to, yes, there's a sprinkler system, but you still would have to move quickly down the hallways and everything else. So that kind of limits some of the, physical disabilities that people have, that that's all things that we have to consider. If something happens, they can't even on the first floor, you can't go out the window unless you break it. You have to go to the inside of the building, go down the corridor in an emergency. That can be stressful. So like you said,
100%.
we're looking out for the tenants here, and it just has to fit kind of what we're looking and for their needs as well.
100%. And, you hit a lot on what has to take place for it to be rezoned, right? And let's peel that back a little bit. So first we can talk about the zoning, right? So right now it is, zoned to be a motel, and that zoning comes with requirements for
Told them what we were doing. Again, the same thing. It really just answer those questions. I know we discussed this before. They thought we were putting multiple families into one unit.
One room.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I mean, here's one thing, that you have to appreciate as well. A motel, traditionally, most motels aren't opening up new, right? Unless it's like a Motel 6 or something of that nature, right? So, I mean, this is something that had been there, and more often than not, like wherever we're going, it has been there for an extended period of time.
Right.
And that will raise some concerns, from the residents. Like, okay, wait, what is happening here? You're taking something that we wake up, I have my coffee at 6 in the morning, I go get my newspaper, I look out the window, that motel is there. Now you're saying things are changing.
Right.
People don't like change.
No.
And we had people showing up in slippers because they didn't like change, right?
And those people were there for 10, 15 years and we're like, nothing's changing. And you're actually going to have more amenities than what you do now. And your rent's not going to go up, So it's like you're getting more and doing nothing, So that's sometimes
but it's hard. It's hard to understand though, too, right? And you have to appreciate that. So yeah, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's something else as well, right? So obviously, it's one thing to say, okay, yes, we approve it. But then what are some challenges that you can come across in an older motel, specifically, I guess, where, there are certain adherences? Then you hit on that a little bit, but kind of deep dive as to the whys, that you have to when zoning changes.
Yeah. So with those, there's different regulations and needs. So going from commercial to R2, they are required to have, sprinkler systems inside of those units. Sometimes electrical monitoring systems. So if the sprinkler system goes off, it's hooked up where an alarm would go off outside of the buildings. So we would get an alarm and say, hey, the sprinkler systems are going off. So it's a whole nother monitoring system that way. It might go directly to the fire department, police, EMS, wherever it may be. Along with those, I know in our building, we had to do egress windows. So like we said, the exterior corridor, there was a doorway here, and what was it, 1.5 feet, 2 feet to beside it, we did egress windows. So it's windows that they could open up and climb out in case of an emergency. So if the door was on fire, they still could get out of that unit secondary. So,
but that's a good one though too. Like, so that one's a requirement, but with as many motels as we've walked at this point, like that's one where a lot of times these older motels, like they're painted shut, the windows are painted shut. And that's a little thing that, like, when you speak to someone that's there, they're like, "Oh, wait, we can have windows that will open,
right.
Where like we can actually breathe." Like, oh my goodness, like that's
right.
outside of a requirement. It's almost like a common decency to have a window that opens up. A little thing that you don't think about.
Absolutely, and that's the other thing. From our standpoint, now you do need to have sprinkler systems in. But again, if you were, it's still dumbfounding how some of these older places didn't need to have them. That's transient people who are coming to stay. They wake up in the middle of the night and alarm's going off. They don't know where they're at, but it doesn't have to have sprinkler systems. So they're disoriented. And hey, there's not a requirement. But now you're talking about your home that we're, making into a home for them, but we have to have sprinkler systems with a door 5 feet away.
well, case in point, talking about transient people, I know we've reviewed, a motel as an example that literally, span of months, I would want to say, right? Like had multiple different people or two different people have arson take place.
Yes.
Right. And it's like one of those things where it's like, once again, transient people, you don't know their background. They're not like when it gets converted to multifamily apartments, we go through a very extensive vetting process. So they go through, everything from credit to background, criminal checks, across the board. So when someone's coming in that we're saying we prove, we're not hitting a home run every time, right? It's just like a job interview. They may check all the boxes and then you find out, that they weren't a fit. But ultimately, the vetting that has to take place for multifamily is significant and extensive compared to someone who's saying, hey, I'm going to stay here for the night or for the week, as in this case for a motel.
Yep.
And then they end up setting your room on fire. It's,
right.
But they don't need sprinkler systems.
No,
well, we do.
Yeah, we do. And this is where the people are, again, waking up all the time. So, like we said, that's happened multiple times. So it's just the process we have to go through. So, we're talking to sprinkler system companies, getting prices on, what's that take to outfit? Is it, public water where they can hook up to the public water system and give enough pressure for those fire suppressants, or if you're on well water or the city water doesn't give enough pressure, you have to have holding tanks, which there has to be a certain amount of holding tanks, certain amount of gallons per minute, which has to be enough pressure. Again, we've dug into this deep because we had one that didn't have enough pressure. So that's what they were trying to go down that road. And then it's fire pumps inside to feed those sprinkler systems. So again, there's a couple different systems that might have to go into place. Depends on, what else is needed. what's the temperature like if there's an outdoor area. You can't have wet chemicals. You might have to have a dry system. So it just depends what that complex entails. Is it utilities are on and it's warm and it's heated in every unit, compared to, hey, one area might be storage. All right, if it's not that big, you just add heat in there. But if it's commercialized, maybe it's regular storage units or whatever that's not heated, you might have to have a dry system. So it just really varies.
And the one thing that I want to let every investor know that as well, like, so when we're saying these details, what that translates to you then is, what is the deal going to be? Will the dollars make sense or not? So when we're evaluating a deal, a lot of this takes place.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things that Mike just talked about, it may take a deal that did make sense, right? It cash flowed, it was going to have great appreciation. But then all of a sudden, what was going to be a $35,000 implementation turned into $75,000, turned into $250,000. Before you know it, the capital expenditures just in the very beginning, ballooned to 500,000 or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the amount of money that the investors are putting in and the return that provides does not cross the threshold for us that it makes sense, right? Because there is a break-even point where you can add in all of the amenities in the world, but if there's all of these other things, that ancillary items that are required that ultimately don't raise rents, right? I mean, rents don't raise because you put in a sprinkler system. So $250,000 implementation, that's just a must-have, right? It's not like saying, hey, the aesthetics.
Yeah.
Windows, they're functional, but then they're also increasing the property value. A sprinkler system is just a checkbox. It's a must-have. And like little things like that, we're evaluating each and every deal to make sure that, okay, hey, will this make sense for our investors or not? Because ultimately we're looking to have the highest returns possible for you. And it may still cash flow a little bit, but then at the end of the day, it's like, all right, is this slightly better than the CD? That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, we're trying to stay ahead of the S&P 500, not, your local savings account kind of thing. So with that being said, though, what are some of the items that we look, at every property, some different ways that we can add value that do increase the rents and add functionality that wouldn't be there in a motel traditionally?
Into a motel conversion?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, the first one, whenever we walk into a room or see pictures, we're looking at where can we have that kitchenette? Where can they obviously have to make food long term, things like that. So, looking at the rooms, hey, is there enough room to do this? Is it going to, are we just throwing it into the corner and it doesn't make sense? Yes, it check marks that box of having one, but it doesn't look appealing or functional. So, that's part of it. That's really looking at, what amenities can we put here to make it worth it?
Well, and I don't want to shortchange that one as well, right? When you say, hey, I want to add a kitchenette is a requirement for Section 8 compliance, right? And as an investor, a potential investor, why that matters to you is because, once again, whether you're the one that cares about the long-term appreciation play or you care about the cash flow, Section 8 is a very important. Section 8 compliance is very important to you, because especially for these units, you can add, it means the difference between someone who may be there for 6 months and breaks their lease early and to someone who wants to be there for the next 20 years of their life. Traditionally, and this is something that may be new to you hearing about Section 8, it's a government program, from the Housing Authority, where the government, Uncle Sam, is paying for the majority, the lion's share of the tenant's rent. They don't meet the threshold for certain income requirements, or they do, if however way you want to say it. They don't make enough money, where Uncle Sam's, they step in and says, hey, let me help you here. And the only requirement on their end is to be able to give a percentage of their income, that is commensurate with it. Now, here's the thing for that. It is a long process in a lot of areas for someone to actually get a Section 8 voucher. Some people may wait years, right?
10 to 12 years sometimes.
10 to 12 years you've been waiting for this voucher. And 10 to 12 years, circumstances haven't changed for you, right? So when you get this, it is gold. So you're like, hey, I find a place that accepts my voucher. It meets my requirements. It might be someone who's 65 years old, 50 years, whatever, right? Like, listen, like, I'm disabled, or I don't make that much money. I need this voucher. I find this place. I love it. They're there forever,
Mm-hmm.
until they die. And what that means for you is stability as an investor. Every single one of those that we get
Mm-hmm.
equals stability, which means that, when I mean stability, when we have somebody in there paying the rent,
Mm-hmm.
that is coming is because it's a business, right? That is forecastable income. When that is vacant, it's not just that month that is a loss to the business. It is the cost of that month, and every month thereafter. It is the cost to advertise. It's the cost to turn over the unit to make it rent ready for the next person. There is a long-term cost associated with that you're never getting back
Right.
for your revenue. And when we take the time to put in a kitchenette and to make it appealing and to make that unit, homey for somebody,
Yep.
that they're like, hey, I want to stay here. The business has a long-term profitability that is easily measurable from that aspect and that little investment. So I mean, that one's huge.
Absolutely. And I want to go back a little bit where you said about the Section 8. Some people think that, they're bad people, whatever may happen. A lot of times it's people on Social Security. So that's their only income. They're medically disabled. Maybe they're just at that age. They're 62, 65, 70 years old, whatever it may be. And their income is Social Security, where it's $900 to $1,200 a month. They can't go out and work, or maybe they can work a certain amount of hours, but because of their disability, they can't. So like you said, the government steps in and makes them pay, round numbers. If their rent was 1,000, they bring in their income's 1,000 a month, they would pay 30%. So they would pay 300 of the $1,000. Part of their income is what it is. So now that person, instead of taking their entire paycheck of $1,000 and paying rent and having $0 left over, can't pay utilities, can't pay for, if they have a vehicle, gas in that vehicle. Yes, they may get food stamps and maybe cash assistance. They're not getting much, because it's a single person. This way, it helps them offset it. So now their income is $300. They were able to pay for their phone or food, other things that are life necessities that they need.
That's
so
right.
It's not that, they're bad people or whatever it may be. It's just making things more affordable for them. Yes.
Well, yeah, and not bad people, right? Because there is a stigma, right?
Absolutely.
But no, they're just people, and yes, there's good and bad people in every walk of life, in every scenario, right? There's bad millionaires and good millionaires. I mean, it doesn't matter about the dollar amount, but also too, back to the whole point of they've waited so long for this voucher. How easy is it for them to lose that voucher too?
Oh man, so in Westmoreland County, if you don't pay your rent in 5 days and the landlord reports that, you could lose that voucher. So if you're not paying your portion of your rent within the first 5 days and your landlord starts, reporting that, you could lose your voucher. If you don't turn in your paperwork every year, so you have to re-report your income on a yearly basis. If you don't report that, you can lose it. And once you're kicked off, you cannot get a voucher again. So you have a lot to lose there.
They're not that equals they're not trashing your room. In this case, room, because we're talking motel, right? That got converted. They're not trashing your place, and that's one thing that you worry about. Someone not taking care of it because it's not their own. In this case, it's like, man, they do not want to lose that, and you provide a great place, and you do. Once again, we're doing our background checks the same as anyone else, right? So they have to go through the exact same process, the same vetting process as everybody. It's an equal process, and you're finding the right people.
Well, and actually part of that too is Section 8 does their own background check. So they do not just give everybody a voucher, whether you waited or not. You cannot have certain things against you and still receive the housing assistance.
That's right.
So they already have a vetting process, which makes things a little bit easier because they're not passing along, certain types of renters, and ones that have, had, bad things in the past.
Indiscretions. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, now again, some of them are not the most outstanding citizens, but that happens. Like I said, we've had people.
It's people.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to they're just elderly and disabled. So they're receiving the assistance, and a lot of landlords do not want to accept it. Now, again, you go through yearly inspections. Whenever you take care of your properties and you're not a slumlord, it's okay. It's fine. You're keeping up with your property. So getting those yearly inspections is not a big deal. If you're somebody who's doesn't want to do that, completely different, So, they are coming in on a yearly basis and re-inspecting that unit to make sure it's up to the standards that they need to be at. Um, so again, I've had people just handicap, elderly, whatever it may be, and like you said, whenever they get comfortable, they find a place. Maybe it's wheelchair accessible, and they like that space. They will stay there for the rest of their life, almost.
That's right. And yeah, and at the end of the day as well, we're never going to be investing in what we would call a war zone. We're looking in great communities and where it has to be a great area. Obviously low crime has, great, job opportunities around. In addition to that though, we are looking, when we do look, you look for the person who is in distress, the one who wouldn't necessarily be a slumlord, but someone who has just lost interest in investing.
Mm-hmm.
And
They're just going to go to town and do it. So they're going to take their money somewhere else and do those, and then they have to take a couple hours out of their time. Go down there, put it in the wash for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it may be. Wait for a dryer to hopefully be open. So you pull it out of the wash and you put it into the dryer. That's another 60 minutes. So these tenants are going somewhere else. Now, part of that conversion, like what we did, was we took out those commercial washers and put coin operated laundry. The water systems were there, the electric, the gas for the dryers, all that was already in place. We just put individualized units, and now they can run over there. Again, it's not that far away. They just walk over, put their stuff in the wash. They come back in 25, 30 minutes, go back to their unit. They're comfortable.
mm-hmm.
Come back in 30 minutes, grab their stuff out, put it into the dryer, leave for the next hour. So they're still able to cook, do whatever they need to do at their home and not have to go anywhere. So it's mostly set up from that standpoint. You just have to put in the coin operated machines for them. So, like you said, all of these motels and hotels, they were doing laundry on site for themselves. All you have to do is replace those units and make it a place that these tenants can come do what they need to, have some tables to fold. Most of the time, they just take it back to their unit and fold them. So I know
That's
that,
right.
looking at a laundromat, they always have the table set out. At ours, we have 2 tables set there. So if they want to, talking to each other, they can do it. But that's just, again, another amenity that's, that was the biggest hit that we heard. Everybody was so happy. And whenever we talk to tenants, they're like, oh, you have coin operated laundry on site. Like, yeah, you don't, some of them don't have cars. So they either got to, get a ride from somebody else, call somebody,
And
make a
it's a
bigger
big
deal.
deal too, right? Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who it is.
Mm-hmm.
But just from an investor perspective, we talked about, a sprinkler system doesn't increase the value.
Mm-hmm.
Adding coin operated laundry absolutely increases the value. That's another revenue stream. Anytime that we can add revenue stream, whether it be bill back for utilities or insert what have you in traditional multifamily, that is something that you're going to say, oh, hey, here's another way that we know that, not just your cash flow, but in addition to that, when that goes for sale, that's a big piece there, because when you talk about tenant retention, one thing there, if they're having to go, and just imagine for yourself, if you had to go every single week or multiple times a week offsite, downtown, wherever it is, to do your laundry, and then you're like, well, man, is there a place where I could have my own laundry there? Right. Then you start thinking like, okay, maybe I need to start looking for another place.
Right.
If there's a pain point, something that's not solved for in the place that they're living, they're going to look somewhere else. And the biggest thing that we talked about earlier is tenant retention. And both of those, yes, the quarters that you're getting, it does add up. But what also adds up is not having tenant turnover. And when you're able to show that month in, month out, on a spreadsheet, when another investor who's looking to purchase it takes a look, that is huge.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because one of the biggest aspects of that is, if you have a tenant, if you're turning over a unit every year, you sign them to a 12-month lease, every year you're paying for that place to get repainted and get it cleaned, carpets cleaned, whatever it may be. That's money gone. If you retain those people and they take care of it, you don't have to have it repainted every year. You don't have to get possibly new appliances or new countertops or whatever it may be, because they stayed and they're happy. So you keep the amenities, clean, in working order. Same thing with their units. So you retain that person. Now imagine in a 5-year time span, you had 5 different tenants. You paid for 5 different turnovers. You advertised that unit. So you had to pay for advertising, however you did it. And now, if you had to go through an agent where they found tenants, you have to pay them a commission. Imagine doing that 5 times. If you retain that customer or that tenant, you only did it 1 time. So that goes right back into the cash flow, which helps out
100%.
So you have those amenities that these people like and appreciate. It goes a long way.
So I would say the biggest thing that you can take away from this episode is there is a ton that goes into motel conversions that go into multifamily apartment buildings. But the biggest takeaway that I would want you to hear, though, is anytime there is work, you heard a lot of stuff. And if you stayed with us, right, and you're like, okay, you lost me at sprinkler systems or what have you. But if you took nothing else away, is this, that when something is hard to do, right, if it takes a lot of work, there's normally some type of additional revenue that comes along with it, right? People stay away from things that are hard.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't want to go to a zoning meeting. A lot of people wouldn't want to do all of the factors that we talked about leading up to turning it into a multifamily apartment building. What that translates into you as an investor is that you have an MRTG Capital that that's willing to do that work for you, which in turn hits on higher returns for you. Even if we're moving to 8% interest rates or what have you, even when we go to higher interest rates, when there is more money to be made, when there's more margin available, then that still doesn't matter to you, because you're like, okay, hey, I see that the interest rate's there, but we're still cash flowing, whether I'm A, B, or C. When we talked about that in the last episode, right? No matter what your preference is, when we said that, and go back to the last episode, you can see about the different shares you can have as an investor, but that matters for you then. And that's why we still care if it doesn't make sense. If we have to pivot to another asset class or what have you, we will. But until then, we'll keep, diving across the United States and finding good deals for the investors.
Absolutely.
So I think that's pretty much what we wanted to cover for today. You got anything else?
No, I mean, there's a lot that goes into, like you said, the biggest item is people don't know how to or want to go to those meetings or evaluate the property. Again, whenever we're looking at kitchenettes, we're looking at where's the water pipes in the walls and what's behind that wall. Can we tap into it? Other people just look at it. They might look at a motel room and say, oh, that's probably too expensive to do. Sometimes you look at it and it's like, no, the water system's right here. Right here, I can tap into right there. There's electric there. We can bring it in. It does not take up any of the floor space. Actually, that's where they had a little kitchenette. They had a countertop anyways, so you're not doing anything but anything hard sometimes. Now, sometimes we are looking at it and it's like, all right, you got to reroute this water and do all this. And hey, they would have pipes running through their ceilings or through the walls. And
it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, aesthetics, it wouldn't look good. And I know, you touched on it about the sprinkler systems. We still makes me laugh because at one of the meetings we told them and they're like, oh, my rent's going to go up because you're doing the sprinkler system. And we're like, no, we built that in. But the one guy's like, well, I don't want them. And I'm like,
Well, neither do we.
Yeah.
But
It's for your safety, and that's what we're doing. We have to do it. And he's like, I don't want it. And I said, well, we can't do every other unit, not yours. So.
But that's why we don't have 5,000 under contract now as well, right? Like not everyone's going to be a home run, and for the most part, most of them won't work.
Right.
But we'll filter through to the ones that can. And
absolutely. And again, it's still at the end of the day, it's still going to be somebody's home. Yes, it's a motel. It'll be converted, but they're the ones who are going to be there every day, living their life. And the white picket fence house in the country for somebody doesn't fit for everybody. And
that's right.
One of these, amenities included with the rooms is all some people want. And actually, we're dealing with a couple now. They're in wheelchairs. They're like, the smaller the better. Like that's what they want. And actually, I do want to touch on that. Whenever we're going through these zoning, we're looking at certain ordinances at these motels in these communities. And the one that we did evaluate, they had an ordinance that a house, or not a house, a home would have to have, I think it was 400 square foot per unit.
Mm-hmm.
So to have it converted, we wouldn't be able to do that specific building now unless we got a special variance. But we're talking, what are these units? 200 to 250, maybe 300 square foot, somewhere in there. That 400 was out the door, with this unit, with this building. So we couldn't convert them because of what their ordinance had in place. So whenever we're, part of our evaluation, we're looking at those before we even go to these meetings, before we're under contract, to see does it still make sense? Like, what are they asking for in these communities? Other communities, they don't have that, but that was the one, we were looking up north, and we went and did it and pulled the ordinances and everything else. And it's like, all right, even if we wanted to convert this, they're shutting us down.
That's right.
Here for this reason.
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Before the zoning meeting, all of the work goes into play. Right. Like we're pretty much at a slam dunk if we're going to the zoning meeting.
Right. We know the costs that are going to be associated with that conversion, pretty closely of what they're going to be. We have loose bids or whatever it may be. But yeah, I mean, again, those ordinances, and that because that community had an overrun of trailers and campers that people were living in. So whenever they went to the 400, again, they had no motel conversions, hotel conversions. So they didn't even know that was a thing until we started going to them. But they were like, well, we have this ordinance in place because everybody was trying to live in campers. And so it was actually an issue. So that's why they put this ordinance in place some time back. But, those are different things that we come across.
Well, yeah. And if you were to come under contract for that and then you can't do anything with it, then you're stuck with a motel.
Right. Right.
So, no, good. Well, thank you again for joining us for another episode of Real Estate Roundtable with MRTG Capital. We'll catch you on the next one. Thank you so much. If you would like to connect, please head on over to mrtgcapital.com and request time to meet with us to answer any questions you may have about real estate investing through a syndication. We partner with small groups of investors just like you, and we're always reviewing deals that could be of interest to you.